Hello, it's Phil at digitaldjtips.com, and today we're talking about the new Traktor Kontrol F1 from Native Instruments. Now, the purpose of today's video is not to give you a demo of this unit. There's some great demos out there already, including Native Instruments' own promotional demos. And also, it's not to give you a feature talk through of the unit. Again, there are some really good ones out there. There's one by Unique Squared that is good. There's also an excellent one from Endo at Dubspot. So go and check those out if you just want someone to talk through all the features of it. What I'd like to do today is answer the big question that we are being asked already about this unit on Digital DJ Tips, which is it for me? How do I use it? Does it fit in with my current gear, or do I need to buy new gear, or is it all I need? Is it something that should interest me or not? It looks cool, but does it fit with what I want to do? So it's that kind of question that I'd like to answer today. And the way I'm going to answer it is by looking at a few ways you might include this in your DJing setup, and also to look at a few of the things you might use it to do, the things you might play using this. So the way you would use it as opposed to just how you would slot it in. So the first thing to note about this, well, I think really quickly we need to talk about what it does. What this does is take control of one of the decks in Traktor. Now you imagine DJ software has kind of 2 decks. Traktor can give you 2 or 4. So say you want to take control of your 3rd and 4th deck in Traktor. Very typically that's what you would do, especially because Traktor already has got sample decks, which are kind of a simplified version of what this does, and a lot of people are already familiar with those. So you want to take control of a couple of your Traktor decks. Instead of playing just MP3s on them, you want to use samples on them. That's where this comes in. This will allow you to control one of those decks at a time. So say you wanted to use 2 sample decks, or remix decks as they're now calling this. This will let you control all of them, as many of them as you want. You can have all the decks as remix decks if you want, but only one at a time. And there's a simple way of switching, but you could buy 2 of these in order to control 2 of them simultaneously. You could buy 4. So that's what it does, and it divides the, so you have a deck which is playing, which has got samples on instead of just a single MP3. Now with the sample decks that preceded this, it would have 4 samples. This gives you the same 4 samples, and that's what the 4 lines are here. They're 4 samples, if you like, with a volume controller and a nice filter, a few other controls, but each one can have up to 16 different samples loaded into it. 1, 2, 3, 4, down a page, 5, 6, 7, 8, down another page. There's 4 pages if you like. And you can play one at a time of the 16. So it's kind of 4-part polyphony. Each sample deck can play up to 4 samples at once. And that's the size of it. That's basically what the thing does. So why would you want it? Who would use it? How would you slot it into your gear? Let's start by slotting it into your gear. Now, this unit is not designed primarily to be your only controller. Native Instruments has included this, which is an overlay, which allows you to take kind of rudimentary control of Traktor using just this. This is designed to control the remix decks. However, you can switch into a mode that puts this overlay into play, if you like, which allows you to take some of the transport controls away, onto hardware and away from the software and away from the mouse and keyboard. So you could use this much like you use the Traktor Kontrol X1, which is this unit here, in order to control the transport of your decks. However, it's not designed to do that. Nonetheless, we'll come back to that because it is useful that it does that. So although it has that overlay, it really is designed to use remix decks and to allow you to use something else to control your transport. So you're going to want something to control your transport, i.e. by transport I mean play, pause, queuing, and all that kind of stuff. So your existing DJ controller would be fine for that. Also, a lot of people use I say a lot of people, a significant minority, use one of these as their only controller. Now why would you do that? The reason you would do that is if you were rolling up in a DJ booth and there's not much room and you play electronic dance music that's all nicely beat gridded and quantized, so you don't need to use decks of any kind in order to get your music playing, and you're used to using one of these, in order to do that, well, one of these, in addition, will let you then play a massive amount of sample goodness over the top of that without needing a setup that's any bigger than that, which can be slotted really easily into a DJ booth. So Some minimalists will already be using the X1. They're going to be loving the idea of adding one of these to unlock one remix deck, or even both, with the quick shifting between the two, into their Traktor workflow. Also, if you are a DVS DJ, a digital vinyl DJs use one of these alongside their traditional record decks and mixer in order to have the looping and the effects controls and so on without having to use the mouse. There's nothing worse, you know, if you're a turntablist and you're used to doing stuff with your hands, you're not going to want to suddenly be using a mouse for effects and loops and cues and so on, which is why, really probably why Native Instruments first came up with the X1. So those kind of people who have already got one of these slotted into a traditional DJ setup, again, might take a look at this and think, that'd be great, I could include samples. Now these kind of people will very likely be using special scratch vinyl, which is vinyl that has all the scratch noises and samples on it, or they'll be using a MP3 that they've possibly made themselves with their favourite scratches on it, all with cue points on them. Now, using one of these, you can assign to the sample pads all your favourite scratches. So you could have a scratch set if you like. As a turntablist, this could be a really, really powerful way of performing, because you could have loads and loads and loads of scratch samples all ready for you to scratch with your turntables. Now that brings me on to another way of using it. You could use it with a normal DJ controller as well, any DJ controller, a Mixtrack Pro, if that's what you've got, any other Traktor controller, slot one of these in, bang, you've got control over your remix decks. But with something like the Traktor Kontrol S4, it's a special case, because if you slot it in alongside this, the old sample deck area suddenly becomes 8 hot cues, which in itself is good, but then you slap one of these there, or slap another one on the other side as well, and you can all of a sudden control your remix decks alongside everything else in Traktor. This is of course one of the most comprehensive Traktor controllers there is, because it's designed for the software. But even better, if you're a DVS user and you've got an S4 already, so you've got the S4 as your mixer at the centre of a Traktor scratch system with 2 record decks, throw these in as well, and you really do have a complex and flexible system, because you could use, as I just described as a DVS user, you could be scratching your samples and using these to control your sample sets, while using the Traktor jog wheels to control your track decks, your decks 1 and 2. If you're a DVS user, you're probably salivating at the thought of that. If you're not, you probably don't know what I'm talking about, and that's fine. So there's a few user scenarios how you might plug this into your system. Let's talk about what you might play with this as well. Now, if you've seen the NI video, which is kind of guitar samples being played on this by Moldova, I think that's a pretty unusual way of using it. It's going to get used in all kinds of ways. It's the kind of hardware that is going to get used in all kinds of ways, and no one really knows. I guess even Native Instruments don't really know how this is going to end up being used yet. But I think that's an abnormal, or rather an unusual way of it being used. I don't think most people are going to be loading kind of, in key or various different pitch notes of a single guitar sample across these buttons and playing tunes on it. I don't think that's how it's going to be used primarily. The clue is in the fact that Native Instruments gives you a few gigabytes of full sample sets to go with this when you buy it, and these are broken down into bass drums and hi-hats and other percussion bits and pieces and stabs and so on. So Native Instruments is expecting you to have kind of a deconstructed electronic dance track broken down to be played on one of these. So you would then be using it as a kind of a third deck, but one that you could control. So you could use it as filler between tracks, or you could use it as something to add layers on top of your normal DJ, and that's quite a simple use of it. Another thing which we've already discussed on Digital DJ Tips recently actually, is the idea of people releasing their music as stems. Now stems are just the individual parts of a song. It divided our audience right down the middle of this one. Some people saying, no producer's ever going to do that. The skill comes in the way you slot your stems together and the way you mix and master your music. Other people saying, what a great idea. Now, of course, people could sell the stems for their music to go on this. Leading on from that, so you could basically buy a whole track and remix it yourself by pressing buttons on these things. So moving on from that, logically, you could take stuff that's already finished, so you could take a track on Traktor and you could break it down, you could take the breaks, you could take the drops, and you could take the vocal bits and listen through every version, finding isolated examples of various parts, and break it up yourself, and then you can produce your own live remixes using this. You can actually do that on the fly, because this can grab stuff from the loop recorder and put it onto these. Scary stuff, I would never try and do that. I mean, I struggle with 4 decks on the fly, frankly. I would never try and do that live, and I don't think most users would either. I think most users will spend the time to put together their own sample sets and then play those sample sets live. Because there's a lot of stuff you can do on these. You can change the volume, absolute volume, the volume relative to each other for all the samples, the key. You can turn key locking on and off. You can make them single hit, or play once, or loops. There's all kind of stuff, and you would want to probably spend a lot of time doing that. It's kind of like beat gridding times by itself for all your samples, and prepare things a bit before you play. So there's another use, and one use that I really would like to try out with this, I haven't had time to yet, it's been here a week, we've only had time to test the functionality of it and a few bits and pieces, but one thing that I'd really like to do myself with it is put favourite parts of tunes on it, but in key sets. So for instance, I could have a set of samples and vocal snippets and so on in the key of C. Now for me it's really easy, because my music is all divided up by key anyway. So what I could do is go through my collection of tunes, listening to my favourite key songs, pardon the use of the word key there, it was an unintentional pun, my key songs, my important songs in each kind of group, so my important songs in the key of C or A minor or whatever, pull out my favourite vocal bits, my favourite bass lines, my favourite drops, my favourite synth stabs, my favourite sweeps from those tunes, and line them all up on this. Now that gives me instantly a whole set of stuff I can drop over a tune that I happen to be playing in that key. So I'm DJing and I happen to be playing an A minor. I can then quickly dial up a set of samples onto this that are in A minor, and I've got a whole load of things which I know will go well over the top of it. Now to me that sounds really creative. Of course I could then go and do it in all the other 12 keys that I have, and then I've got stuff to drop over everything. I think that's the first use I'm going to put this to. I think the first thing I'm going to do to test this over the coming weeks and months is do just that. Because little bits of vocal, the way I DJ, I quite often want to drop in a bit of a vocal or a bit of a stab or a sweep from something I'm going to play later or that I've played before. To be able to do that and have 64 samples in a set, to me is really powerful. That I think is what's exciting me the most about using it. As you can probably tell, this is not a simple piece of gear. I don't think this is going to appeal to a hell of a lot of DJs immediately, because it's too involved. DJing for a lot of people is about getting some favourite music, some favourite tunes and playing them, and that's it. Decks 3 and 4 are quite scary to a lot of people. But I think what will happen is that some of the more adventurous DJs will begin to use this, people will see how they're using it, and then it'll slowly filter down to the people who aren't so technically inclined, and it will take on a life of its own. This thing has taken on a life of its own. This is getting used for all kinds of purposes that NI, probably, if they're honest, didn't intend it to be used for. It's why it's become such a popular piece of gear. There's no reason why the same thing can't happen with this. Whether it happens or not, we're going to have to wait and see, but it's certainly got the potential. So there's our quick look at some of the ways you might slot this into your system and some of the things you might do with it. Please feel free to comment, and please feel free to share the way you're using it in the comments below. And thank you for watching.